You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Kary Youman, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. All right, Jonathan. So for those who may not know you yet, what's your book about and what do you hope readers take away from it?
Yeah, so my book is about a dream of learning how to fly, paragliders specifically. And it's told through the prism of 10 years with recurrent and uncurable cancer. I think the thing I hope that readers take away from it is a sense of urgency to do that big, difficult thing that you've been wanting to do. And maybe also a reflection on their own mortality. I think that's something that's useful to consider and reflect on and think about frequently. There's no reason not to, and I think that can only benefit your life by understanding that it's short, so make good use of the time you have.
Those are wise words. I definitely want to dive more into the cancer component.
Yeah.
But before we get there, like, where did the idea for the book first come from? Like, obviously, you're sort of looking at your mortality. Where did the idea come from just to even get this out there?
Yeah. I think the first person who ever kind of planted the scene of, oh, you can write a book was my old therapist from years ago. And he made a comment at the end of a session and he said something like, I think you have a book there. And I didn't think much of that at the time. And then what happened really kind of in the past 2-3 years, I took 6 months off of work. I had another, stretch where I had to deal with more cancer, more surgery. And during that time, I decided to focus in on writing, something that I enjoyed doing. Hadn't really built a consistent practice around it. And so I decided, what, I'm going to do that and see where it goes. And after really developing a writing practice for about a year, there was a point where I was like, well, you know what? I think I have the foundational skill I need to write a book. Now I just need now I need a template. I need an outline. So yeah, there were a couple of different things, but I certainly started in an iterative sort of fashion with smaller pieces before I decided, oh, I'm going to write a book now.
So you mentioned your therapist. Was the idea for the book something that had already been brewing way before the cancer diagnosis, or was it the cancer that kind of started this motion of like, okay, I need to tell this story?
I think I knew that whatever story I would be telling, it was going to be connected to the cancer story because it's hard to decouple that from really anything in my life at this point. What I had shared with him was, more around details and my experience going through treatment, which was awful, and then recovering from it and how I thought about that now, what I had learned. Where it comes to the book, and his remark was, wow, that experience in and of itself is a lot. The way you tell it, you have a story there that might be a book. But what I came back to when I was mapping out the narrative that became, a manuscript that became many revisions into a manuscript, was about something that did predate cancer, which was my interest in flying. And so I weave that story of how I came to even learn about paragliding, and then this recognition of, wow, this is amazing. This is something I want to do. And that kind of sets up the story. And then there's all these things that get in the way of wanting to do that, but then I finally do. So, yeah, it's kind of the story in a nutshell.
No, that resonates. Skydiving, paragliding, bungee jumping. Like when I think about those things, like something in me just starts to swell, and I imagine a lot of people feel that. Like it almost seems like this ultimate act of freedom. How does like that experience of paragliding connect to your philosophy on facing fear and uncertainty in general?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, Couple of things come to mind. We're land mammals. We're not meant, we're not designed to fly. You have to train your mind in a way that, I don't know, is unique. It's uncommon. It requires facing deep fears. Some people, it would never occur to them to even try, but there really is something to that, to being with an uncomfortable experience, an uncomfortable feeling, and training your mind to understand that this is just an input, this is information. How I choose to react, I have some degree of control over. So that's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing that's been super important for me, and part of why I tell basically everyone they should try paragliding, is that getting up above the ground, above the trees, above mountains, that perspective, altering your perspective on the world and your place in it, boy, that's powerful. I think really challenging experiences in life can do that. They change the way you think about yourself, you think about others, think about your purpose. There are similar experiences you have when you're flying. And you get to see just absolutely breathtaking views of nature that really only birds get to see, and you get to see them as well. So I recommend that everyone try it. If for nothing else, then change your perspective for a few moments. You'll learn something. Yeah.
Wow. No, it just sounds like an incredible thing to do, and it's something on my things to do list. I don't even want to call it a bucket list, but I mean, how many times have you been up in the air now at this point?
You get to a certain point and I mean, I have a logbook somewhere that has all of the numbers on it, but it's in the hundreds. I, I'm still in the stage where I'm not an advanced pilot. I'm an intermediate pilot. When I go flying, I can get up and stay in the air for several hours if the conditions are right. But yeah, I've been doing for 2.5 years or so. Yeah.
Wow. And this all started from the cancer diagnosis, or is this something that you had already started doing previous to that?
I learned about paragliding before all of the cancer stuff, but I had never done it. Where I realized it was a thing and it was something that I wanted to pursue was after I started learning how to skydive.
Oh, wow.
So
So you
that was
skydive as well?
No, I started learning about 13 years ago, and I realized a couple things. I realized I didn't have enough money to finish the training, and I realized that I really liked flying the parachute a lot more than I did like falling out of the sky. Uh,
Mm.
so I was like, how do I fly a thing and stay in the air and not jump out of a plane? And I was like, oh, paragliding. And I found it, and I was like, you know what? Someday I'm going to learn how to do that.
And look at
And
you
then,
now.
yeah, and then the cancer stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the story, the circuitous pathway to learning how to fly and what it's taught me, along with all of the things I've learned about myself, having been through um 10 years of this crazy
Mhm.
disease.
Wow, it's really inspiring, Jonathan. I find it fascinating just in general as human beings and just the news we get. It happens with airplanes. You hear about the 2 or 3 airplanes that crash every year, but not all the ones that actually land safely. And with paragliding, you hear about the 1 or 2 freak accidents that have happened over the span of 10 years, and it freaks everyone out. When you're up there, is there a part of you that feels like safer than you would like walking in the streets of New York or driving on some, crazy highway?
Oh, that's a very conditions dependent
Mm,
question, because sometimes the air just feels wonderful.
mm,
I had some flights. I went to Colombia earlier this year, and then most recently, I was in the French Alps flying there.
wow.
Um, and in both of those locations, pretty much all of the flights that I had, the air was just wonderful. There were, um, really smooth thermic air, the sort of air that birds fly in and go up. We do the same thing.
Mm,
Um, I've flown in air that is not friendly and makes you really, um, really tense and holding on for dear life.
mm,
So yeah, it all kind of depends. Um, your mindset is a big factor too, right? Like when I'm preparing to fly, checking in with yourself, how you're feeling, trying to put some distance between um, anything you've been anxious or worried about, just in life in general, and what you're about to go do. Flying in the air it's a pretty important thing. Part of kind of my meditative pre-flight preparation. Um, but yeah, I've had probably more flights than not where you get up to a certain height and you relax and you breathe.
mm,
Um, you're just kind of floating and sailing through the air. Those are pretty special.
mm. How
Especially,
long are you normally up there? Like, what's like an
I,
average?
and again, all really depends on the conditions, but most of my flights nowadays are, you know, hours plus.
Wow.
I'm not quite at the level where I can go into a cross country flight and fly, 5, 6 hours and fly 100 kilometers. But I'm getting there, and I will be there at some point.
Wow. That's incredible, Jonathan. Wow. So just, changing gears a little bit, I would imagine just, what you've experienced over the last few years has been challenging, let alone to write about it. Um, were there moments when you questioned whether to keep going and what helped you to push through to actually get your book published?
Mm, yeah, there were parts of it that were certainly challenging to write, in that I had to revisit really difficult moments, um, especially a couple of the chapters where I'm writing about recovering from reconstructive surgery,
Mm,
um, which is not an easy thing to go through. Um, Something that, in the long view of things, really improved my life a lot.
Mm.
But boy, it reshaped things physically and kind of how I think about myself. Um, Now those were challenging, but they were important for me to write. I learned a lot in that process.
Mm.
I d- I don't know that I had any moments where I wasn't sure if I would finish. I'm the sort of person, if I set my mind to do something, I'm gonna do it. Damn it. um, which is can be a really good quality to have. Um, Yeah, I was surprised. I gave myself more time for the manuscript than I ended up using to get to first draft. Um, yeah, but no, there weren't really any moments where I was like, I don't think I'm gonna finish this. There were a couple of moments where I wondered what my motivation was for writing it and struggled with that. Um, Thankfully, I had, my wife and my editor and folks who were very encouraging. Um, yeah, writing about yourself, having yourself be a character in a story that you're also narrating is a very strange feeling. um, and then you have to go back and revise and try and remove um, try and think about the story from the perspective of a reader. So I had some moments where that was challenging, but um, yeah, I always managed to kind of keep the goal in mind, which was finish the book, revise the book, publish
Yeah.
the book, talk about the book. Here we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it's sort of a gift and a curse when you set something in your mind, like you're gonna get it done
Yeah,
regardless.
yeah,
So I mean, Jonathan, you've turned something. I mean, again, we're gonna dive into this a little more, but you've turned something, deeply personal into something that has impacted and I would imagine helped a lot of people at this point. What's been, I won't say the most, because I'm sure there's a lot, but what's been one of the most meaningful responses you've received from someone who's read your story?
yeah. I love this question, and it's something I've thought about a bunch. Um, there were a couple of people who, after reading the book, texted me, and a couple of them sent like actual photos of passages in the story
Hmm.
and told me how important it was for them to read those sections. And that meant a lot. That someone I knew, and most of the time these are friends of mine because they're texting me. um, that was important for me and meant a great deal that the story was resonant for them,
Hmm.
that they could see themselves in it, that it was encouraging, that they learned something. Um, that sure means a lot. um, and I've been doing book events. I've had a handful of readings here in Washington. Um, I had a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't met before, who came up to me after the reading, and she told me a very personal story about her brother who had died by suicide, and
Hmm.
um, how that experience had shaped her career and her interest in mental health. Um, yeah, I've definitely learned some things about friends and people in the paragliding community that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And just hearing that the story that I'm sharing inspires people to want to tell their own stories has meant a lot to me. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think just kind of to your point, when our books can inspire other people to want to tell their stories, it just feels like one of the greatest gifts you can offer someone, just to open
Yeah.
up and be vulnerable in that way. That's incredible. Um, you were talking about the reconstructive surgery, and I know you go more into it in the book, but you know, I mean, you don't look like you're 100 years old. You look like a fairly young guy, you face challenges most people can't imagine. How has your diagnosis changed the way you see time, purpose, and like what really, really matters in your life?
Yeah. It's changing a lot. I mentioned earlier that reflecting on your mortality is something that's important to do. It's something that a lot of people tend to put off until it's right in their face.
Mm,
Um, I think in some ways I was fortunate to have this diagnosis, um, because what it did was it brought into contrast the things that were really important for me early. Um, I wouldn't wish a cancer diagnosis on anyone at age 30. It's pretty disruptive to your life. Um, but I don't know. In a lot of ways, it's given me more than it's taken.
mm,
It shaped my perspective and philosophy on life. Um, I think it's made me a more patient person too, particularly with myself.
um,
um, and yeah, none of us are going to get out of life alive. We also don't have enough time to do everything we could ever want to do.
mm,
So we have to make choices and choose certain things over other things. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with an author named Oliver Berkman.
oh,
He's one of my faves,
mm,
but in his book, 4,000 Weeks, which is average person's time alive, 4,000 weeks,
mhm,
um, he talks about this concept about how, you know, um, things are going to disappoint us. We're never going to get everything done we want to get done.
mm,
Nothing is ever going to be perfect. And if we can find a level of peace and acceptance with that, we're going to be a lot happier in life.
mm,
Um, so I'm trying to take that to heart in kind of how I live. Um, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Know that
mm,
um, your ambition is a great thing, but you can't be crushed by disappointment when you aren't able to optimize your life into exactly what you want. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure in society to do that, and
mm,
um, yeah, find find the core things that are the most important and put your attention there.
mm,
Um, Reduce the amount of distractions that you have, and know that the attention that you give the people in your life, the time you spend with them is really what you're going to be thinking about at the end, not how much money you made, not your career successes. It's going to be the people and the experiences that you had. So,
mm.
yeah.
For you, Jonathan, is there like a sort of a clear line of like before the diagnosis and after in terms of just how you live and how you see your reality, or was it like this sort of gradual change for you?
That's it's so many years now. Um, it's kind of hard to say. I will
Mm,
say that part of why I wrote the book is I wanted to understand. All I knew that I had changed. I
mm,
wanted to understand how. Um, so that was part. That was part of what I learned in retelling this story and really thinking about how 10 years with all this stuff had shaped my life. How was I different now at, 40, 41 versus the young person I was in my mid to late 20s? So yeah, there is, I'll leave it up to readers to make the judgment. And my wife is probably the best person to answer this question. And she knew me 10 years ago and knows me now. Yeah, I would say gradual. Yeah. Um, I mentioned patience. I'm more patient with other people, with myself. I'm less judgmental. I, I think some of these are things that tend to come with age too. So it's probably a mix of both things, but um, I've certainly had to learn how to live with limitation, learn how to adjust and be patient and know that um, I'm I can still do important things even as I'm not physically the same person I was, 3, 4 or more years ago, especially after those surgeries. So yeah, some some changes, pretty gradual, some less so, but uh, the sum total, yeah, I'm definitely not the same, not the same person that I was pre-diagnosis.
Mm, I can only imagine. So you talked a little bit about this earlier. I'd love to sort of double click on it, but every author, the publishing journey looks different for all of us. Some are traditional, some are hybrid, some are indie. What path did you take, and what was the most challenging or rewarding part of like finally getting your book out into your readers' hands?
Yeah, so I self-published, and I knew early on that as someone who had never published a book before, written a book before, I was going to need help. Um, so probably the most important decision I made early on was to hire an editor,
Mhm.
um, someone who knew storytelling, who was familiar with what this looks like in the context of self-publishing, someone who had helped bring many different books in different genres to life. Um, yeah, that was pivotal for me. Um, for as much as I learned about myself during this process, boy, I learned a lot about the mechanics of what goes into not just writing, not just the composition part, but developmental editing and revision and cover design. That was another person I brought in, a cover designer. And all of that is before we start talking about the marketing and promotion, um, which is a whole other different body of work that I've mostly done myself, but have brought in kind of key outside professionals as well. Um, I, yeah, I'll say about self-publishing, and I can't really speak for fiction because I don't write fiction, but nonfiction, yeah, you need an editor. Um, to do this well isn't necessarily inexpensive. uh,
It's an
there are,
investment for sure.
yeah, there are trade-offs in terms of time and expense. Um, yeah, I'm really glad I chose to go this route because shopping a book deal is a whole other thing,
Mm,
and retaining the creative control was important for me, and also control over the timeline, right? Like I was the variable on the timeline, not someone else, not a publisher and, their market cycles. So that was important to me. And I tried to think of it as an experiment, as a proof of concept for the next books, which I'm already thinking about.
Nice. Maybe we can talk a bit about that too. So you kind of talked about the impact that the book has had. But once your book was out there, how did things shift for you, in your work, in your relationships, or just even in how you view your story? Like once you were a published author, like what shifted?
Mm. Well, I was really proud that I had managed to finish a book and publish it. Um, Boy, there are a whole bunch of strange insecurities and things that you learn about when you start reading reviews. And I I had some truly odd um, experiences I never would have anticipated, like seeing. So, like, I have an author site, I sell the book through my site. I can see who's buying it, right? And I, keep tabs on Goodreads and things of that nature. There were a couple of people who I haven't spoken to in like a decade or more who I saw had purchased and read my book. And that was I didn't anticipate that happening. And I didn't anticipate how I would feel, which was kind of strange. Wow, this person who I haven't communicated with now knows the story of all this time that we haven't been friends, right? Um, yeah, there's something kind of strange and unique about writing a memoir in that it's very personal, like you mentioned, and it can be something of a challenge to separate someone's reaction to the story and how you've written it from the story being your own life, right? And so that occasionally was a challenge for me. Um, but yeah, I think the kind of overarching feeling was one of pride and accomplishment. And um, yeah, it's been wonderful to hear that people couldn't put the book down, right? Like that. I had a lot of feedback that was like, wow, you really keep the story moving. It was fun to read. It was very engaging.
Mm.
And not only that, I learned a lot about you, hearing that from readers and friends. And that felt nice. The not knowing part for people who, I haven't spoken to. And I, it's hard not to wonder what they thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, no, it sounds like, I mean, just in general, like getting a book out there, it feels like a badge of honor. And it sounds like for the most part, people have been very receptive to it, which is probably a really good
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Yeah.
Mhm. That's great, Jonathan. So, this podcast is called The Resilient Author. And, we know resilience shows up in different ways for everyone. Sometimes it's discipline, for some people, it's faith. And for myself, it's community. What does resilience look like for you, like these days?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned community. So this is a theme in the story. Um, and I talk about the community that I found here in Olympia, Washington, which is where I've lived for the past 15 years or so. And then more recently, the community I found in the paragliding sport. Just these wonderful people who come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and what unites us is this love of flying.
Mm.
Yeah, the title of the book, um, Unflappable, is, it's a nod to that concept, resilience, right? Unflappability is another word for resilience. Um, but there's another facet to that too, which is you build resilience by being vulnerable, right? By allowing other people to help you, to encourage you, to hold you and lift you up. Um, that took me a lot of years to learn how to do. um, yeah, so I talk about this in this story as well, but it's certainly a theme in my life, which is that I've become more resilient by knowing that I can't do everything myself and that I need other people's help. I need to be gracious in asking for help and seeking others' help.
Mm.
Um, yeah, for a lot of different reasons, that's something that didn't come naturally to me.
Mm.
um, but thankfully, I I just have some wonderful people around me, friends, and my wife. I can't imagine arriving in a reality where I'm as resilient as I am without her help and navigating through all this stuff over these many years. So I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, it sounds like you and your wife have developed a very special relationship, man. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm. Just gonna take that in. So Jonathan, a lot of our listeners are, sitting on a story. Maybe they've opened up a couple documents, typed a few words, closed the back, and they just haven't finished. They haven't really started. What would you say to someone who feels called to write but isn't sure they're actually ready?
Yeah. I I'm gonna give a version of advice that they may have come across already, which is you just have to start writing and sitting and doing that day over day over day. Um, and it doesn't matter the quality. You just need to do it.
Mm.
Eventually, it becomes an extension of yourself. I don't know. I almost think of it now as a meditative sort of practice. Um, and then you do that enough and you build that muscle, and then it becomes a matter of putting structure around it. Um, you know, I mentioned, this first book being a proof of concept for other books, but um, going even smaller than that, before I had a book, I had a Substack, and I would write, you know, 700 to 1,000 word pieces every week. Um, find little experiments like that and run them. Um, one of the things that I was looking for early on, but didn't end up finding until recently, was kind of a writing partner, someone who had kind of shared interests, um, who wasn't a full-time writer, didn't do that for their career. I don't do this for my career. I have a full-time job, but was deeply passionate about it. Um, I it's worth spending some time to try and find a person like that or a group like that. I didn't until fairly recently. Um, there's another source of encouragement and another reason to write right there, another person who you can collaborate with. The other advice I would give is when you've run your experiments, when you feel like, yeah, I can reliably put together 1,000, 2,000 words. I know roughly the amount of time that it takes me to go from, hey, I have an idea of a thing I'll write, to here it is, polished and ready to share. Once you have a decent idea of what that time looks like, and you start to have some ideas and concepts, some outlines for a larger narrative, there's so many great books on where to start. Happy to offer some recommendations there, but I would say there comes a certain point where you're going to want to talk to an editor and get some guidance to help direct your creative energy in a way that's not going to cause you a lot of extra work later on. And then also really spending some time on, okay, who is this for? What's the message I'm really trying to communicate? And what is my goal? What is my intent in producing this thing? A good editor is going to take all of those inputs in and say, all right, here's some ideas and things to think on for how you can accomplish this. That was so helpful for me. So yeah, writing funny, get in the habit of writing all the time, run some experiments, and then once an idea starts to coalesce, think about finding an editor. Yeah.
Those are all really good. I'm sure there's probably someone listening. You mentioned something about a couple of books, and I'm curious, how did you find your editor?
I found my editor through a referral. So someone I knew through a professional network. I happened to mention I was in the process of mapping out a book, and she put me in touch with this person, and I had gotten a couple of like quotes on Readsy from editors, and it's like, And then I had a call with my editor, Bailey, and we just clicked, and I was like, all right, that's it, you're hired.
That's amazing. That doesn't happen often. That's amazing that you found that connection like that.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the biggest investment for sure, but probably also the most important in helping to shape that book into something that really was closer to what I wanted to accomplish than I could have done on my own. No way I could have produced what the book ended up being without her guidance. Yeah.
Yeah. Editors are, they are the glue. So before we close, Jonathan, I'd love to know, what's next for you? You mentioned something about some new projects, a new book, any creative adventures you're excited about?
Yeah, well, I hope to do some more travel. So I mentioned this year that was a theme, right? I went to Colombia, I went to France. I may do some more book related events in California. I'm gonna continue to promote this book, and then I'm gonna start the process, I think, of writing a query letter and seeing if there's any interest in book number 2, which is going to be not about me, but it's going to be about people who share something with me, providers and patients in head and neck cancer and head and neck reconstructive surgery. Another really amazing community that I happen to be a part of, and I want to highlight the stories of the surgeons who are involved in this work, what makes it unique, the relationships they have with their patients, and their patient stories. How you go through something that is so life altering, what that journey looks like for other people. And I think I'm in a unique position to be able to tell that story really well. So that's book number 2. I don't know exactly when I will start working on that in earnest, because like I mentioned, I have that whole job thing. But yeah, that's kind of next up. And then my wife is due for a vacation. She's been working very hard. And I've been jet setting off to other countries. So it's her turn now.
Yeah, I'm sure she's looking forward to that.
Yeah, Hawaii is in the cards for
Right.
next year, I think. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, that's not too far from Washington, so yeah, should be
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, you had me imagining when you were talking about your full-time job. I just kind of got this image of Superman, kind of a Clark Kent at work, and outside you're doing all kinds of wild stuff. Does anyone know that that you're an author at your job?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of coworkers have bought and read my book.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's been great. The boy, the amount of time involved in balancing getting the pages in and then, going to work. Yeah, it's not
That's a
big
full-time job in itself. Yeah. You did it though. You did it.
and yeah.
Mhm. Right on, Jonathan. So gonna wrap up here shortly, but I'd like to invite you to the lightning round. I've got 5 questions.
Right.
Just speak from your heart.
Love it.
All right. What's one book that changed your life?
Mm. Mm. I have to say 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, that book really spoke to me. And his kind of mantra is self-help for people who are skeptical of self-help books.
That's a good
Which is
thing.
very a piece of my philosophy. So yeah, I got Oliver Berkman. Yeah.
I'll definitely get that in the show notes. If you could have dinner with any author, past or present, who would it be?
I'm a huge fan of Ed Young. He's written a handful of books on science and nature. I think his most recent one is called An Immense World, all about how different animals and species perceive the natural world. Boy, I love his writing style. I love his ability to storytell these subjects in such a accessible and compelling way. Yeah, I would love to have dinner with him and hear about what goes into researching a book like An Immense World or I Contain Multitudes. And yeah, he seems really cool. I've heard some videos of him giving speeches, and he seems like the sort of guy I'd be friends with.
Well, hey, it's never too late. You might cross paths here one day. When it comes to getting ideas out, Jonathan, are you more of a writer or a talker?
I'd say in general, when I have ideas, they go right to a notepad. Yeah, I tend to start there. And then as I pick apart an idea, oftentimes I draw little diagrams as well, depending on the purpose. But yeah, it usually, when we come to like the speaking part, I usually have written something that's behind it. So yeah, I tend to ideate on pen and paper. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Finish this sentence. Writing my book taught me to.
Take time to get outside of myself. I mentioned that I learned a lot of lessons from my editor and her feedback. One of them was like that empathy and taking on the perspective of your reader, knowing that they don't live inside your head, and keeping that in mind as you're moving the story along. That was a really important lesson for me to learn. Yeah, something that I'm not sure comes naturally to all writers. Certainly didn't come naturally to me, but wow, my writing is so much better for having spent some time getting outside of my head and outside of myself. Once I've done that like initial draft and initial like creative step. Yeah.
In one word, what does resilience mean to you?
I'd say it means patience. Patience with yourself, patience in that have control over the comings and the goings in life. Patience to know that if you stick with something long enough, it's going to work out or it's not. Patience to try and to fail and to try again. Yeah, writing a book takes a lot of patience.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Living with challenging health stuff also takes patience. Recovering. So yeah, to me that would be a kind of connecting theme in resilience is patience for yourself, for others, for the way you live life. Yeah.
Well done, Jonathan. You made it through the lightning round. We're going to come into the final chapter now. If you could leave one piece of advice or encouragement with our listeners, something they can take with them, long after this episode is over, what would it be?
I'd say be mindful of where your attention goes. We tend to forget how much space our phones, our notifications, our calendars, all of the little distractions. It's easy to forget how much clutter is up here in your mind, even your own thoughts. But when you make an effort to, on a daily basis, pay attention and find calm, wow, that can really change your life. Yeah. So many things are competing for our attention, but it's a really, really valuable thing. So be intentional about where you choose to give your attention. that would be my advice. It will certainly help if you're interested in developing the ability to pay attention long enough to write a book or any long form thing. You'll be well served by finding a way to develop that skill. And it's useful in a lot of other ways too. So
Absolutely.
learn to meditate, learn to be aware and mindful of where your attention goes. Yeah.
I love that word, intention. That was really well said, Jonathan.
Thank you.
This has been great. I really appreciate you opening up and sharing your story. Before we wrap up, where can people find your book and continue to follow your journey?
Yeah. So my book is available on Amazon and bookshop.org. Folks can also buy it directly from me at www.unflappable.press. And I'm also on Substack. You can find me there, unflappable.blog. So the writing that I do, you'll find on Substack. But yeah, would love for folks to check out the book. It's available in audio as well. So print, ebook, and audio for folks who are as big on reading print or ebooks on their Kindle. So yeah.
Excellent, Jonathan. Well, again, thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing your story. And yeah, hopefully we can cross paths again in a couple months. And
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you, Kary, for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.